Ayo did not believe in destiny until the afternoon he met Sade. It was one of those Ibadan days when the heat pressed heavily on the skin, when even standing still felt like work. The streets buzzed with voices, hawkers calling out their goods, motorcycles weaving through traffic, radios playing highlife music from open shops. Ayo had stopped by a small roadside kiosk to buy water after a long morning at work. That was when he noticed her. Sade stood behind the kiosk, struggling to lift a crate of bottled drinks. Her arms trembled slightly as she tried to balance it, refusing help from a younger boy who hovered nearby. Ayo watched for a moment before stepping forward. "Let me help you," he said. She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." Their fingers brushed as he lifted the crate. It was a small moment, almost unnoticeable, but something about it stayed with him. When he looked up, she was smiling. Not the polite smile people give strangers, but a warm one, open and sincere. "What's your name?" he asked without thinking. "Sade," she replied. "And yours?" "Ayo." That was how it began, without ceremony, without drama, just two people meeting in the ordinary chaos of life. Over the weeks that followed, Ayo found reasons to pass by the kiosk. Sometimes he bought water. Other times, he claimed thirst he didn't really feel. They talked about simple things, work, family, childhood memories. Sade spoke softly, but when she laughed, it filled the air around them. She told him about her dreams. She wanted a peaceful home, children who would grow up knowing love, and a husband who would treat her as a partner, not a possession. Ayo listened. He admired her strength, the quiet determination behind her gentle voice. She wasn't loud or dramatic, but she knew who she was. Their relationship grew naturally. No rush, no pressure. They learned each other's silences as much as their words. On weekends, they walked together, sharing roasted corn or ground nuts. Sometimes they talked about the future. "I want a big family," Sade said once, laughing as they sat beneath a mango tree. "At least 3 children, maybe 4. Ayo smiled. "You want to turn the house into a playground?" "Yes," she replied. "I want noise, life." He reached for her hand. "Then we'll build a home full of it." When Ayo proposed, it wasn't in a fancy restaurant or during a grand celebration. It was one quiet evening, after dinner at her parents' house. He stood awkwardly, his hands slightly shaking. "I don't have everything," he said honestly, "but I promise to choose you every day, even when life is hard." Sade didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply nodded, eyes shining. "That's all I want." Their wedding was modest but joyful. Family members danced until their feet ached. Elders prayed for fruitfulness, for long life, for children who would bring honor. Neighbors spoke proudly of the couple. "Such love," they said. "Such a good match." Sade believed those prayers would be answered quickly. She imagined pregnancy within the first year. She imagined baby clothes, names, late nights filled with laughter and exhaustion. Ayo believed it too. Neither of them knew that life had other plans, plans that would test their vows in ways no wedding prayer ever mentioned. That night, as they lay side by side in their new home, Sade rested her head on Ayo's chest. "Our children will be lucky," she whispered. Ayo kissed her forehead. "Because they'll have you as their mother." At that moment, their future felt certain, and that certainty was exactly what made the waiting so painful. The first few months after the wedding felt like a dream Sade never wanted to wake up from. She woke every morning before Ayo, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. She cleaned the house with joy, imagining tiny footsteps that would soon follow her around. Every ache in her body felt like a sign. Every delay in her monthly cycle filled her with quiet excitement. Maybe this is it, she told herself again and again. The first time her period came after the wedding, she sat on the bathroom floor for a long time, staring at the tiles. It wasn't fear, just surprise. She had assumed pregnancy would come easily, like everyone said it did. Ayo noticed her silence that evening. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She forced a smile. "Yes, I just thought, never mind, it will happen." And for a while, that hope was enough. Months passed, then a year. Sade became more aware of her body than ever before. She counted days carefully. She avoided bitter foods people said affected fertility. She prayed harder, kneeling longer at night. She fasted even when her body felt weak. Each time her period arrived, it felt heavier, physically and emotionally. Ayo tried to stay positive. "We're still young," he said. "There's time." But even he began to notice the subtle changes. Sade no longer lingered in baby shops. She avoided holding newborns for too long. At naming ceremonies, she smiled politely, then found reasons to step outside. People started asking questions. At first, they sounded harmless. "So, when are we celebrating you? You people are enjoying yourselves too much. Don't worry, it will come." Sade laughed when she was expected to laugh. She nodded when she was expected to nod. But inside, something began to crack. At night, when the house was quiet, she lay awake, listening to Ayo's breathing, wondering what was wrong with her. "Maybe I waited too long," she thought. "Maybe my body is weak. Maybe God is angry with me." One evening, after attending yet another naming ceremony, Sade broke down. "I'm tired," she said, her voice shaking. "Everywhere I go, it's babies, questions, smiles that hurt." Ayo pulled her close. "You are not failing," he said firmly. "This is not your fault." She wanted to believe him, but doubt is stubborn. It settles quietly and refuses to leave. As the second year approached, Sade suggested going to the hospital. "Just to be sure," she said, trying to sound casual. Ayo agreed, though the idea made him uncomfortable. Hospitals had a way of turning hope into numbers and charts. The waiting room was crowded, with couples who avoided eye contact, each lost in their own silent fear. When the doctor finally spoke, the words were careful and vague. "Sometimes it takes time," he said. "We'll run a few tests." Those tests introduced a new kind of waiting. Waiting for results, waiting for explanations, waiting for reassurance that never fully came. Nothing was clearly wrong, but nothing was clearly right either. That uncertainty was the hardest part. At home, Sade became quieter. She smiled less. She spent more time alone, staring out the window, watching children play outside. Ayo noticed and tried to bridge the distance. "Come," he said one evening. "Let's go for a walk like before." They walked in silence at first. "What if it never happens?" Ayo stopped walking. He turned to her, searching her face. "Then we face that together," he said. "But don't decide the ending before the story is done." She nodded, but her eyes were filled with fear. By the third year, hope no longer came easily. Family members began offering advice, some kind, some careless. "Drink this. Visit this pastor. It might be spiritual." Each suggestion felt like another reminder that something was wrong. Sade began to feel like time itself was judging her. Every birthday felt heavier. Every mirror reflected a woman who felt incomplete, no matter how much love surrounded her. Ayo too felt the weight, though he rarely showed it. At work, colleagues joked about children and legacy. At home, he tried to be strong, but sometimes strength felt lonely. One night, Sade whispered into the darkness, "If you want to leave, I'll understand." Ayo sat up immediately. "Never say that again," he said, his voice firm but hurt. "I didn't marry you for convenience. I married you for life." She turned away, tears soaking the pillow. The waiting years had changed them. Not loudly, not suddenly, but slowly, like water wearing down stone. And neither of them realized yet that the hardest part was still ahead. By the fourth year of their marriage, the quiet waiting that had once seemed bearable began to weigh heavily on Sade. She had grown accustomed to the months without news, the hospital visits that ended in inconclusive results, the tiny rituals she performed each morning in hope. But nothing could prepare her for the whispers, those hushed words that traveled like smoke through her village and beyond. It started subtly. Neighbors would pass by with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. When she walked through the market, women who had once greeted her warmly now offered curt nods, their eyes flickering with curiosity, pity, or judgment. In church, mothers whispered as she sat in the pew behind them. Words like barren and waiting too long floated through the air, unspoken, but understood. Poor Sade. a woman said once while Sade stacked cassava in the market. She's doing everything right, but some things just aren't meant for everyone. Sade's hands trembled. She wanted to walk away, to leave before anyone else could notice the tears threatening to spill. But she stayed, swallowing the lump in her throat. Pride held her upright, but inside, her heart ached. Even family, the people she had always counted on for support, began to weigh in. Ayo's mother, who had once been kind and encouraging, started to ask questions. "Have you two considered remedies?" she asked one evening after dinner, her voice polite but firm. "Maybe you should consult someone more experienced." Ayo remained silent, sensing the storm brewing in Sade's eyes. Sade smiled faintly, though her chest felt tight with resentment. Why must love always come with judgment? She thought. At weddings, she noticed the subtle stares. At naming ceremonies, conversations about children never paused for her to ignore. Friends and cousins would joke, sometimes cruelly disguised as teasing. "Why are you still childless? You've been married so long," a neighbor asked casually one Sunday morning. Sade forced herself to laugh, masking the hurt. Ayo too tried to smile, but his jaw tightened. He wanted to defend her, to say, "How dare you speak to my wife like this?" But every time he opened his mouth, he realized there was little he could say without igniting a fight or making matters worse. The whispers became heavier when rumors started. People suggested that perhaps one of them was infertile. Some even claimed that Sade had hidden her true condition from Ayo before marriage. Others whispered that Ayo might have been unfaithful, explaining the delay. None of it was true. But truth rarely mattered in these moments. Sade felt trapped. She wanted to scream at everyone, to demand silence. She wanted to run far from the village, away from prying eyes and judgment. But she could not. Leaving would mean abandoning Ayo, abandoning the love they had built over 4 years, and she could not do that. She confided in Ayo one night, her voice breaking under the weight of long-held frustration. "I cannot do this anymore," she said. "Everywhere I go, people whisper. Everyone thinks something is wrong with me. I feel invisible, yet exposed all at once. I thought love would protect me, but even love cannot shield me from their eyes." Ayo held her hands, rubbing them slowly. "I know," he said softly. "I see it too, and it hurts me more than you know. But we have to hold on to each other. If we let them affect us, we will lose more than just patience. We will lose us." Sade leaned into him, crying quietly. For the first time in months, she felt heard, truly heard. And for a brief moment, the whispers and judgment faded, replaced by the warmth of his presence. But the pressure was relentless. With each passing year, Ayo's relatives began making suggestions that cut deeper than gossip ever could. "Perhaps you should consider another wife," one uncle said casually during a family dinner. "It is our duty to carry on the family line." Sade's heart raced. She had expected advice, guidance, even prayers, but never this. She felt her marriage and her very identity threatened. That night, she packed a small bag and placed it quietly near the door. Ayo noticed immediately, panic replacing the usual calm in his chest. "Sade, what are you doing?" he asked. "I cannot do this anymore," she whispered. "I cannot face the judgment, the whispers, the suggestions. Maybe you would be happier without me." Ayo's eyes softened, but hardened at the same time. "I married you," he said firmly. "I chose you for life, not for convenience. I do not care what anyone says or thinks. You are my wife, and I will not let them or anyone else come between us." Tears filled her eyes as she sank into his arms. The whispers, the mockery, the pressure, they were still out there. But in that moment, she realized something important. Love, true love, could be louder than the judgment of the world. The village continued to talk. Relatives continued to speculate. But Ayo and Sade had discovered a powerful truth. They had each other. And for now, that was enough. Yet even as relief settled in their hearts, a storm still lingered on the horizon. Outside pressures were only the beginning. The coming years would challenge them in ways whispers never could. The morning sun barely touched the horizon when Sade and Ayo walked into the small clinic on the outskirts of the city. The walls were faded, the floors scuffed, but it was a place of hope for many couples like them. Inside, the waiting room buzzed with quiet tension. Couples holding hands nervously, women clutching folders of past test results, men staring at the floor in silence. Sade's palms were sweaty as she gripped Ayo's hand. They had already tried home remedies, herbal suggestions, prayers, and months of hoping. Now they were placing their trust in doctors. The doctor was polite, professional, but clinical. His questions felt like probes into a wound they had long tried to hide. Tests were ordered, blood work, scans, ultrasounds, and Sade felt herself shrink under the cold, sterile light of the hospital. Every beep of the machine, every sound of a printer printing results seemed to echo her fear. Days later, they returned for the results. The doctor's face was calm, but unreadable. "There's no clear medical reason for your condition," he said slowly. "Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it never happens naturally. You may need further tests, or you may consider other options, such as IVF or adoption." The words were heavy, crushing in their gentleness. Sade looked at Ayo, hoping for reassurance, but even his eyes were clouded with worry. At home, the silence between them was unbearable. Neither spoke immediately. Sade retreated to her bedroom, burying her face in the pillow, wishing she could disappear. Ayo sat in the living room, staring blankly at the floor, fighting his own rising panic. Days turned into weeks. Arguments surfaced that had never existed before. Small frustrations, an untied shoelace, a burnt dinner, a missed phone call, became triggers for deeper tensions. "Why didn't you remind me about the test?" Sade asked one evening, her voice trembling. "I thought you'd remember," Ayo replied, frustration edging his tone. "We can't control everything, Sade." Tears streamed down her face. "I can't control this either, Ayo. Why does everyone else have children, and we just wait?" Ayo moved closer, wrapping his arms around her. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I'm just scared too." Sade's tears mixed with guilt. She hated that their love, so strong once, now carried cracks they could see. And yet, even in the brokenness, they clung to each other. The days that followed involved more hospital visits, more questions, more subtle blame. Relatives continued to suggest reasons, some spiritual, some natural, some subtly implied that perhaps one of them had failed. "You know," Ayo's uncle said casually during a family gathering, "sometimes these things happen for a reason. Maybe Sade is not able. Or maybe you, Ayo." His eyes flicked at him. "You should consider options before it's too late." Sade's chest tightened. She forced a smile, but inside, rage and hurt battled with the love she still felt for Ayo. She had married this man because he was honest, because he loved her, because she believed in them. Yet even love could not shield her from the weight of constant judgment. That night Sade lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She remembered how she had laughed freely when they first married, imagining children running through the rooms. Imagining lullabies sung in the dark. Now the laughter was replaced with quiet despair. She whispered to herself, "Maybe I am not enough. Maybe I am broken." Ayo, in the room beside her, heard the soft whisper. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached for her hand across the thin divide of the bed. Sade squeezed it lightly, letting the warmth remind her that, despite the storm, someone was still there. The weeks that followed brought more tests, more inconclusive answers, and more nights of silent tears. Sade felt herself retreating emotionally, building walls she did not want, but felt necessary for survival. Ayo noticed, heartbroken, but unsure how to bridge the widening distance. Then came the first serious argument. It began over something small, a misplaced prescription, a forgotten appointment, but it quickly escalated. "You think I want this?" Sade shouted, her voice raw. "Do you think I enjoy being reminded every month that my body has failed me?" Ayo's jaw tightened. "I didn't say that. Don't put words in my mouth." "I can't keep doing this, Ayo," she cried, tears streaming freely. "I can't keep being your hope when I feel like a failure every single day." The room was heavy with silence after that. Sade fled to the bedroom, leaving Ayo sitting alone, fists clenched, heart aching. That night, he could not sleep. He thought about everything, their love, their vows, their dreams. And he realized something painful but necessary. Love alone might not solve everything, but it could survive everything, if they chose to fight together rather than against each other. In the darkness, he made a promise to himself. He would hold her. He would protect her. And he would not let the world, the whispers, the tests, or even their own fears destroy what they had built. Sade, meanwhile, cried herself to sleep, exhausted by grief and fear. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a small spark of hope remained. Hope that Ayo was not going anywhere. That love, however battered, could still be enough. And in that quiet room, two hearts, fractured by circumstance, began slowly, tentatively, to beat in unison once again. The pressure from the outside world had been simmering for years, but now it boiled over like a pot left unattended. For Sade and Ayo, what had once been whispers and polite suggestions had grown into persistent, direct interference from family members, people whose love was conditional, measured by children, tradition, and societal expectations. It began subtly, with Ayo's mother inviting friends over and commenting on the delay in having children. "You know, a man needs an heir," she would say casually, as though this were advice, not an attack. Sade would smile politely and nod, but inside each word felt like a small cut. Then the subtlety faded. Ayo's uncle cornered him one evening after dinner. "You have been married 4 years," he said bluntly. "It is your duty to carry on the family line. Perhaps you should consider another wife. It is normal." Ayo's hand tightened around his glass. "I married Sade," he said firmly. "I will not take another wife. Not now, not ever." "Love will not fill your home if there is no child," the uncle replied, shrugging. "Tradition is tradition." Sade overheard the conversation from the kitchen, where she had been pretending to wash dishes. Her hands froze. She had long feared this moment. People outside had always judged her. But when the judgment came from those Ayo loved most, it felt like a dagger twisting in her chest. That night, Sade lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the women in her family who had borne many children, the blessings that came with status and respect. And she thought about herself, how her love had been questioned, how her worth seemed measured by her womb rather than her heart. By the next week, Ayo's relatives had begun openly pressuring him. His mother, speaking with a firmness that brooked no argument, suggested he remarry. "Sade is a wonderful woman," she said, "but sometimes life does not grant what we wish. Another wife may solve the problem." Ayo refused. Each refusal brought tension. The household became a battleground of subtle arguments, silences, and resentments. Sade felt trapped between her own pride and the relentless insistence of others. One afternoon, Sade quietly packed a small bag. She placed it by the door, her heart pounding. She did not want to leave. She loved Ayo too deeply. But she could no longer bear the constant scrutiny, the whispers behind her back, the pressure to meet a societal standard she could not fulfill. When Ayo found the bag, he stopped in his tracks. His eyes scanned the room, searching for clues. "Sade, what is this?" he asked, voice tight with alarm. She did not look at him. "I can't do this anymore," she said softly. "If the family cannot accept me as I am, then maybe it's better if I go." Ayo moved closer, taking her hands in his. "You will not leave," he said firmly. "Do you hear me? I married you for life, not for convenience. I do not care what anyone says. My heart chose you. That is final." Sade's shoulders shook as tears fell silently down her face. "I feel so small," she whispered. "So judged. So inadequate." "You are not inadequate," Ayo said, cupping her face. "You are my wife, my partner, my heart, and no one will make me doubt that." Even as he spoke, the phone rang. It was Ayo's mother, inquiring again if he had considered her suggestion. Ayo ignored it, placing the phone down on the table and picking up Sade instead. Over the next months, the interference did not cease, but Sade and Ayo built an invisible wall around themselves. They spent evenings talking, laughing, and remembering why they had fallen in love in the first place. They became each other's sanctuary from the judgmental voices outside. Still, it was not easy. Ayo's relatives attended weddings, baptisms, and community events, all the while scrutinizing Sade's every move. Each remark, each question, each sideways glance was a reminder that the world had expectations. One Sunday, during a family gathering, Ayo's uncle again made a pointed comment. "Perhaps the gods have other plans for you, Ayo, but the house must continue." Ayo stood, voice calm but sharp. "My house continues," he said, "because of love, not because of heirs, and anyone who cannot respect that can leave." The room fell silent. Even the family who had pressured him stared, unsure how to respond. Sade felt her heart lift. In that moment, she realized that love was not about yielding to everyone else's idea of happiness. It was about protecting what they had built together. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. The pressure from family would always exist, but it no longer dictated their lives. They had chosen each other, fiercely and unconditionally. And though the world would continue to whisper, judge, and pressure them, Ayo and Sade understood a truth far more powerful. Love chosen is stronger than love dictated. The years of waiting, whispers, and interference had left marks deeper than either Ayo or Sade had ever imagined. Their love, once effortless and light, now carried the weight of unspoken fears, bruised pride, and quiet desperation. They had survived hospital tests, family suggestions, and gossip in the village, but now, for the first time, it felt like survival itself was a struggle. It began on a Thursday evening. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the house in the heavy, golden shadows of dusk. Sade returned from work, exhausted and tense, carrying the weight of another day, filled with reminders of what she lacked. Ayo had spent the day navigating polite inquiries from colleagues about children and legacy, questions that cut at him even when spoken with a smile. The tension in the house was palpable. Small frustrations, burnt food, misplaced keys, forgotten appointments became sparks in a dry forest. By the time they sat down for dinner, the air was thick with unspoken resentment. "I forgot to take the prescription to the pharmacy," Ayo said quietly. Sade's eyes narrowed. "Again?" she snapped, the words sharper than she intended. "How can you forget something so important?" I was busy," he muttered, defensive. "Busy?" Sade's voice rose. "We've been busy for years, and nothing changes." The argument escalated quickly. Years of pressure, frustration, and whispered judgment outside the home now boiled over inside. For the first time, Sade spoke words she had never said aloud. "I can't keep doing this," she shouted. "I can't keep hoping, pretending, waiting. Every month is another reminder of what I'm missing. I am tired, Ayo. Tired of proving I'm enough. Tired of living under everyone's expectations. Maybe it would be better if we ended this marriage." Ayo felt a sudden chill. Her words struck like arrows, precise and painful. He had feared this moment in the back of his mind, but hearing it aloud brought a new kind of despair. "Sade, don't say that," he said, his voice low, trembling. "Don't. I can't lose you." "Maybe it's too late," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Maybe love isn't enough anymore." Ayo stepped closer, desperation rising in his chest. "Love is everything," he said, voice firm now. "You are everything. We will survive this. We have to, because I cannot imagine life without you." Sade's sobs shook her from the inside out. "I feel so small, Ayo, so inadequate. Everyone, family, neighbors, society, they measure me by something I cannot give." "You are not inadequate," Ayo said, cupping her face in his hands. "Your worth is not measured by children. It never was. It is measured by your heart, your courage, your patience. And I have seen more courage in you than in anyone I know." For a moment, silence filled the room. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, carrying with it the faint sound of children playing down the street. A cruel reminder of what society expected, yet also a distant echo of hope. In the days that followed, Sade retreated into herself. She spent hours sitting by the window, staring at the horizon, wondering if happiness was a luxury she could no longer afford. Ayo gave her space, but stayed close, offering quiet comfort, gentle gestures, and unwavering presence. They began attending counseling, quietly at first, in a small office tucked between two stores. Speaking with a professional allowed them to unpack years of hurt, fear, and resentment. Slowly they began to understand a difficult truth. Love alone was not enough. It had to be chosen and defended every single day. They talked late into the night, about fears, about dreams, about the gossip, the pressure, and the pain they carried. They acknowledged the anger, the bitterness, and the near breaks. And finally they began to rebuild trust in each other, brick by brick. One evening, after weeks of quiet work, Sade turned to Ayo. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. "Do you really think we can make it?" she asked. Ayo smiled, brushing her hair back from her face. "We have to," he said, "because I cannot imagine a life without you, and because what we have, our love, deserves to survive everything." Sade leaned against him, finally allowing herself to believe that survival did not mean simply existing. It meant growing, choosing, and fighting together. For the first time in years, the house felt lighter. The weight of expectation had not vanished, but the weight of their love carried more strength than the world's judgment. And though the future was still uncertain, one truth was clear. Love, when chosen even in the darkest moments, can survive even the breaking points that seem insurmountable. The breaking point had come and gone, leaving scars that neither Ayo nor Sade could forget. Yet, it also left a lesson etched deep into their hearts. Love, to survive, had to be chosen deliberately every day. And so, they began the hard work of choosing each other, not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. The first step was creating a space where only they mattered. They spent evenings walking in the quiet streets of Ibadan, holding hands and talking without judgment or interruption. Gone were the sideways glances, the whispers of relatives, the constant advice on what they should do. In their small world, there were only two hearts beating together. One evening, as the sun dipped into a red-orange horizon, Sade paused on a dusty street corner and looked at Ayo. "Do you think people will ever understand us?" she asked softly. Ayo took a deep breath and smiled. "Maybe not, and that's fine. We don't need their understanding. We just need each other." Sade nodded, letting the warmth of his words seep into her weary soul. She had spent so many years seeking approval, from family, society, even strangers, that she had forgotten the power of simply being loved for who she was. They began speaking openly about their fears and dreams in ways they had never dared before. Sade admitted the depth of her despair during the years when every failed cycle had felt like a personal failure. Ayo shared his own silent worries, the ones he had hidden behind a calm facade, afraid that showing vulnerability would make him appear weak. "I felt helpless," Ayo admitted one night, sitting beside her on the veranda. "I wanted to fix everything, but some things I could not. And watching you hurt, it hurt me too." Sade reached for his hand. "I was scared too," she said. "I thought love might not be enough. But it is, isn't it?" "It is," he whispered, tightening his grip. They also made the conscious decision to defend each other publicly. When relatives continued to comment, Ayo would calmly but firmly set boundaries. "Our family life is our business," he told them one afternoon. "We will handle it together, and your opinions will not dictate our love." Sade learned to do the same. When neighbors whispered or colleagues asked probing questions, she smiled politely and let Ayo's strength shield them both. For the first time, she felt empowered, knowing that choosing each other also meant protecting each other from the harshness of the world. In time, they created small rituals to keep their love alive. Every Friday, they would cook dinner together, laugh, and tell stories about their childhoods. On Sundays, they walked through the park, watching families and children play, but without envy or bitterness. Instead, they observed with hope. Hope that their love, steady and chosen, could eventually create its own joy, even if it did not come in the form they had originally imagined. Sade began volunteering at a local children's home, finding joy in nurturing and caring for children who needed love. Ayo supported her fully, helping with logistics and sharing in the happiness that came from giving without expectation. In these moments, they discovered that parenthood and family could take forms beyond the conventional, beyond biology, and still fill a heart completely. One evening after returning from the children's home, Sade turned to Ayo with a soft smile. "Do you realize how far we've come?" she asked. Ayo nodded. "We've survived the whispers, the judgment, the pressure, and even our own fears. And yet, here we are, still choosing each other every day." Sade rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to think love was easy, that it would be enough on its own. I was wrong. Love is not enough. It has to be fought for, protected, chosen." "Exactly," Ayo said, "and we've proven it can be done." The couple also faced practical decisions with newfound clarity. They considered adoption, acknowledging that their dream of raising a child could be fulfilled differently. They researched, visited homes, and planned together, and each time they took a step toward that dream, their bond strengthened. In the evenings, when the wind rustled the leaves outside their home, they would sit quietly, holding hands and reflecting on their journey. The hardships, the tears, the arguments, they no longer felt like failures. They were reminders of resilience, proof that their love could survive even the darkest times. By choosing each other consciously, Ayo and Sade discovered that happiness is not given. It is built, nurtured, and defended. They had survived infertility, judgment, and despair, and in doing so, they became not just partners, but allies, friends, and soulmates. And though the world outside would continue to speak, to judge, and to pressure, inside their home, they had found peace, security, and the unshakable certainty that they were enough for each other. Choosing each other had not been easy. It had been painful, exhausting, and uncertain, but it had been worth every tear, every argument, and every long, silent night. Because in the end, love was not just a feeling. Love was a decision, and they had chosen it. After years of waiting, testing, whispers, and pressure, Ayo and Sade had arrived at a new understanding of love. A love that had survived judgment, despair, and the harshest of expectations. They had fought to protect it, choosing each other every single day, and now they faced a new challenge, redefining what family truly meant. It began with a conversation one quiet evening in their home. The sun had long set, leaving the room dimly lit by a single lamp. Sade sat across from Ayo, hands folded in her lap, her expression serious but calm. "I've been thinking," she said softly. "We've endured so much, all the tests, the years, the judgment. Maybe it's time we consider other ways to become parents." Ayo leaned back, studying her face. "You mean adoption?" Sade nodded. "Yes, it may not be what we imagined, but it can still be a blessing. We can give love, and that can be our miracle." Ayo's heart swelled. He had spent years hoping for a child in the traditional sense, but he realized now that love and family were not confined to biology. "I think it's beautiful," he said, "and I want to do it with you." Their first step was research. They spent evenings learning about adoption laws, visiting children's homes, and speaking with social workers. Each visit brought a mixture of joy and sadness. They saw children yearning for love, children with bright eyes and tender hearts who had never known the security of a permanent home. One day, they met Amaka, a spirited 8-year-old girl with an infectious laugh and a curiosity that could not be contained. She had been in foster care since infancy, moving from home to home, never staying long enough to feel rooted. Sade knelt to meet her eyes. "Hello, Amaka," she said gently. "Would you like to come live with us?" Amaka's eyes widened. She had heard similar words before, but her experience had taught her caution. Slowly, she nodded. That moment, so simple, so fragile, was a miracle in itself. As the paperwork proceeded and the adoption was finalized, Ayo and Sade learned something profound. Family is not only what is given by nature, but what is built with patience, love, and choice. The years of waiting had not been wasted. They had prepared their hearts for a love that was deeper, more deliberate, and stronger than they could have imagined. When Amaka first came to live with them, their home was filled with laughter that was different from the quiet happiness of their early marriage. It was raw, joyous, and alive. For the first time in years, Sade allowed herself to imagine a full house again, not with her own biological children, but with the family they had chosen to create. Ayo watched Sade as she played with Amaka, her eyes shining with love and purpose. "She's lucky," he whispered, "because she has you." Sade smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Amaka's face. "No," she said softly, "we are lucky because we get to love her." The gossip that had once haunted them faded into irrelevance. Relatives who had questioned Sade's worth now looked on in awe. Ayo's uncle, who had once suggested taking another wife, was the first to step forward with congratulations. "You have built something remarkable," he said quietly. Even their friends, who had quietly speculated over the years, saw the joy that radiated from their home. It was not the life they had originally imagined, but it was richer, fuller, and infinitely more meaningful than anything society had prescribed. One evening, as Sade tucked Amaka into bed, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The sleepless nights, the hospital visits, the arguments, the tears, all of it had led to this moment. She knelt beside her bed and whispered a prayer of gratitude, not for the life she had imagined, but for the life they had built together. Ayo entered quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Do you remember when we first started this journey?" he asked. Sade nodded, smiling. "I do. I remember the hope, the pain, the doubts. And I remember that through it all, we never stopped choosing each other." "That's what made all the difference," Ayo said. "Love is not magic, it is choice, and we chose each other every day." They embraced, knowing that the trials they had faced were now part of their story, not shameful, not bitter, but sacred. Their marriage had survived infertility, societal judgment, family pressure, and personal despair. And in surviving, it had grown stronger than they had ever imagined. In time, their home became a beacon of love, a place where kindness, patience, and understanding reigned over expectation. Friends and neighbors admired them, not because of the children they had or hadn't born, but because of the love that endured. Ayo and Sade learned that miracles do not always arrive in the form we expect. Sometimes, the greatest miracles are found in hearts that choose each other despite pain, in hands that hold each other through fear, and in the courage to redefine family on one's own terms. And as they watched Amaka laugh and run through their courtyard, Sade whispered to Ayo, "Not all miracles look the same, but this is ours." Ayo smiled, kissing her forehead. "Yes, ours, and it is perfect." The house, once filled with silence and longing, was now filled with joy. And in that joy, they found peace. A peace built not on expectation or tradition, but on love, endurance, and the courage to choose each other every single day.